Recently, I showed you a list of what someone claimed were the worst 25 Transformers of all time, and frankly, I was disgusted by the list. A lot of repetitive entries, a lot of low-hanging fruit, and barely any real research done to conclusively decide and show what the worst Transformers were. It always comes across as just idiotic when you present yourself as an expert and then put out a list that clearly shows you haven't done any real research. So, let's show them how it's done. Now, for starters, we're going to lay a few ground rules here. Now, I'm not going to include anything from a subline, so nothing fast action battler that's made for little kids, nothing built to rule, which is, let's be fair, not fair to compare to other mainline Transformers. Also, nothing small or free. We are looking for basic class minimum, so no Legion class, no Legends class, certainly no McDonald's toys or anything else you got free in a kid's meal. We want things you actually had to pay money for. And let's keep in mind, this isn't exactly a top 10. I acknowledge I could be forgetting a few here. This is here's 10, which means I am acknowledging that these are just 10 examples and not necessarily a concrete list. But if we want to show them what an actual top 10 of the worst Transformers looks like, this is as close of an approximation as I can present today. So without further ado, let's show you what 10 of the worst Transformers toys of all time actually are, and I'm going to start with something that I'm going to be doing a full video of in the near future. Revenge of the Fallen Scalpel is an absolute mess of an action figure, if you can even call it an action figure. Not accurate in microscope mode, not accurate in robot mode. It doesn't look like anything it's supposed to portray. Also, this toy is known infamously for being extremely fragile and easily broken. In fact, it's very common to open up this toy and find several of the ball sockets on its legs already broken off. So this becomes a toy that is unable to stand up, has very little play value in robot mode because it's tiny little, barely working arms and no real posability beyond that, and no real play features to make up for the lack of posability. It pretty much all hinged on those legs working, and the legs don't work. The only reason it's so low on this list, despite doing literally nothing right, is because it only cost you about $7 or $8 to figure out that this was a bad decision. Other than that, it's pretty harmless. It's just one of those toys that doesn't quite do anything right that it set out to do. Inaccurate in both modes, not playable in either mode, very easily broken, very easily making this list. With this channel, you'll see some familiar names, and Retrax is definitely one you probably expected on this list. During Beast Wars, they had a penchant for making a lot of insects Predacons, which makes sense given the logo. However, it did lead to them coming up with a lot of bugs that really weren't that threatening and really weren't something that you'd really want to disguise yourself as. Or, as Megatron put it, not one of the most powerful animals on the planet. No, from earwigs to pill bugs, Beast Wars had some weird ones, and Retrax is, a very weird, very ineffective beast mode that's basically entirely designed around the ability to ball it up like an actual pill bug. Which, okay, fine, they accomplished. The Sacrifice is a robot mode that does not function as an action figure at all. You get leg posability that is incredibly hampered by how back heavy he is, and you get arms that don't do anything except a hugging gimmick. This is what happens when you over-gimmick a toy and revolve it around one particular gimmick and then try to work the action figure in there somewhere else. What you end up with is a toy with one or two tricks, and once you're bored of those tricks, you don't have absolutely nothing. No posability, no action features. Well, I guess no action features you want to play with anymore. No accessories. He just becomes a lump of green plastic that you kind of regret buying. Overall, no, nothing about him to me that was ever fun. I am above including Legion class toys on this show, until they do something like this. At the tail end of Transformers Prime in the Beast Hunters era, we had the strange revelation that Hasbro was actually going to upscale 4 of their Legion class toys and release them as deluxes. And we thought, okay, well, if you add to the paint and throw in some extra articulation, that wouldn't be terrible. They'd be nice and solid. It'd be interesting at least. What we got were just straight up upscales, replacing ball joints with universal joints, admittedly an improvement, but absolutely nothing else. In fact, some looked worse than their original predecessor. Bumblebee is the one I single out because of all the ones they could have upgraded or done something special with. This one was ripe for it, and they did literally nothing to it. It is an ugly mess in vehicle mode and in robot mode, full of detail that could have been painted or highlighted. Nothing. No added articulation, a sword accessory he never had in the show, and just... it's the audacity. It's the sheer audacity of Hasbro to think that after an entire, 3 years worth of toys, they could end off the line on 4 upscaled minifigures with absolutely no improvements whatsoever and charge $15 for it. It's an absolute disgrace and an embarrassment. Thankfully, it was just a test. It was just something they did because the tail end of the line always has figures that are not produced in high numbers. They were only released in Europe, never came out in America or other parts of the world, and thankfully it stayed that way. And thankfully, we never got anything akin to it ever again. Even Cyber vs. Warrior class toys for $15 are more enjoyable than these things were. If you ask me what my favorite video I ever made was, I will tell you it is Beast Machine's Silverbolt. That Plastic Addict review took me a year's worth of writing to get the poem exactly correct the way I needed it to be, and a cameo from Scott McNeil himself really adds to it. The toy itself was definitely worth all of that effort because it is an absolute atrocity. Keep in mind, this was year 2 of Beast Machines. They were producing Blast Punch Optimus Primal at this point. They knew that accuracy was now important, and they were actually able to make them show accurate. For some reason, they did nothing of that sort for Silverbolt, who was supposed to be the tallest of the cast in the show, and dark in colors, ends up being one of the smallest figures in the line with a bright rainbow of inaccuracy strewn across him. Throw in an overuse of translucent plastic, common in Beast Machines, a weapon that is really like half the bulk of the toy just taken off of him, a beast mode that looks absolutely nothing like the Condor, and you have a recipe for just one of the biggest what were they thinkings of all time. To this day, that design has not gotten justice. From what I can tell, the only reason that they actually did Silverbolt as a basic was to make sure that that size class had some major character in it. And instead of, giving us, Rat Trap at a normal size that might have actually been correct for the character, we got this. Yeah. Yeah. Go watch my review of that. You're in for a treat. Number 6 is one that I actually had intended to review and still intend to review, and I think this is why I don't tease reviews anymore or tell you what I'm going to do next, because it never seems to go right. The Power Core toy line is a massive amount of problems to it. Weird drones with odd shapes to them, broken up looks, a lot of weird engineering, and just odd toys in general. I don't think anything comes close to Double Clutch, however. A boring looking vehicle mode with silver flames to try and spice up what really cannot be spiced up, and a robot mode that looks swollen, not in a fat-shaming way. He literally looks like he's being inflated in the chest and is about to burst, thanks to his scrawny arms and tiny head. The big capper here is the engineering for the combined mode, which they did a running change on this toy with not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 remolds, and the toy still barely works. Does not hold together very well, looks ugly in the combined mode. It got some of the worst looking drones in the entire line. There is no cohesion. There is nothing that actually looks intentional as a robot. It looks like shrapnel was glued onto him. This toy as a whole has so many issues. And of all the Power Core toys, easily the one I would point to as the worst. There's seemingly nothing going right on this figure whatsoever. And the more you look at it, just the worse it got for me. We'll talk about him again someday at length, I assure you. This might be cheating, but the Animorphs toy line was its own major toy line. It had its own section in the store, had its own TV show on every Saturday, and had its own share of plastic pieces of words I can't say without getting demonetized. But we're going to be talking about not the one that I did in the top 5 worst of all time. I've grown since then, I've learned more things, I've had new experiences, and I've learned that there is nothing worse in Animorphs than the Retrax. Imagine, if you will, a decent enough beast mode, decent enough looking T-Rex, swollen maybe, but hey, there it is. But it is where you break the toy down into its three individual human action figures that the nightmare begins. Horrific depictions of the children from the live action. Makes it worse now. No. Horribly mutated, horribly misfigured and malformed. This is just sheer body horror in the form of plastic. It is monstrous, disturbing, and overall just nasty looking. What's worse is that it ruins all function for the toy. The gimmicks of the T-Rex mode end up hampering the functionality of the individual human figures, and having to carry these gigantic bulk of T-Rex parts as part of them basically ruined every single one of them as action figures. It is just what were they thinking? What were they thinking to make something this horrific? It looks like something out of a horror movie. And something that is just so unplayable as a toy in either mode. There's nothing you can do with a Retrax that actually salvages it or makes it fun. It's just a nightmare unfolding in front of your eyes. The best you can do, put it back into T-Rex mode, glue it together, and never think about it again. Pretend it's a Jurassic Park toy. That's literally the only out you have. Otherwise, I don't know, bonfires are good. Now, you would probably expect a hotshot on this list, but as I've said, I've grown and matured since then. While I love having hotshot as my own personal whipping boy, if I'm going to be fair, Armada Sideswipe was so much worse than hotshot was. You take a boring sedan vehicle mode, okay, some defended it, it still looks like an everyday car, doesn't look special or anything, and you load it down with as many gimmicks as you can. Now, aside from the fact that it's got urine yellow windows with Transformers written across the windshield, hey, Sideswipe, we're trying to disguise ourselves here. No. When you get into the robot mode, you realize just how badly this toy functions for its gimmicks. The arms are compromised because of a firing fist gimmick, which doesn't work very well because the tabs aren't really made to grip, so it's very hard to even trigger them. The legs are hampered by the vehicle's hidden motorcycle gimmick. The gimmick itself is cool. The fact that it takes away all functionality of the legs and gives him massive amounts of shell kibble hanging off of his shins, that's not cool. The back has his Minicon gimmick, which hampers his arms because the gimmick here is it raises his arm. You put the Minicon in the gimmick, you lower it down, and his arm goes up. Most Transformers in Armada needed Minicon power-ups to unleash bigger weapons and power up, firepower and all this, rocket launchers and all this. This one needed it to raise his arm. And I guess when you have those big Popeye arms, I guess you need help with that sometimes. Yeah, and then, of course, even the chest, like there's this weird little springboard gimmick in the vehicle mode that does not work. So literally every aspect of this toy is somehow compromised because they crammed in so many gimmicks and none of them work well. And they all go to make the toy itself thoroughly unplayable. And then just the weird function, the weird looking Minicon. Oh, and the gun made of translucent plastic that you have to piece together. Yes, I left mine connected together and it broke. Big shock. Yeah, if I'm looking back at Armada, this was the worst one. This one I got flack for, and to this day I will get flack for it again, but you know what? I am still going to call it. Revenge of the Fallen Demolishor is one of the worst toys I have ever played with in my life. It's not because it's a unique design. Okay, fine, it's a unique looking robot. I like unique looking robots. Transformers needs to be more unique than it has been in the last 10 years, I give you that. Unfortunately, you're talking about a unique that shouldn't have been produced in the first place. Just because it's different doesn't make it good, and if you like it, that's fine. But I would at least require my action figures to be able to, one, stand up on their own 2 feet or whatever they have as feet, and two, if they turn into a vehicle, to roll. I would like my vehicles to roll. Instead, what I got was an action figure that has to tripod on his arms in order to stay vertical, which means I can't do anything with his arm articulation, takes away all of his posability, and I have no functionality in the vehicle mode to roll because of those same treads, which don't roll on their own. We also found out, in these later years, I was always worried that those treads would break down over time because the rubber would dry out, they'd crumble and all that. Hasn't happened as far as I know, but what has happened is the material, the chemical in that rubber has started to leak, and it actually melts other plastic it's touching. So it's created a brand new problem that I never realized would have existed with this toy. So even then, even if the rubber treads have maintained, there is still danger to them. Isolated incidents, I admit, but still, the fact that it happened, weird. This toy has no redeeming value for me. I don't like the look, that's personal preference. But I also don't like that it has no function to it. I don't like that its vehicle can't do what it should do. I don't like that its robot can't do what it should do. I feel as a whole it is a failure of a toy that never should have been designed by by Industrial Lights and Magic in the first place. Seriously, what sense does a giant Ferris wheel-wheeled robot make anyway? Who would actually want themselves to look like that? Sometimes low-hanging fruit deserves it. So we're going to be talking about Supreme Chitor once again. This was hyped up as the ultimate Transformer. This was going to be the first time in a long time. The first time really since, I want to go way back to G1, just like the latter years, like year 3 and 4 G1, since Hasbro had done such a huge Transformer at retail. Almost 2 foot tall in robot mode, the size of an actual house cat in beast mode. And what did you get? For your $50, you got a toy that couldn't stand up because its feet were too small and its top was too heavy. Arms that barely functioned and had no articulation because of the incredibly weird gimmicks that they worked into it. Seriously, you had to you had to shotgun pump the arm to fire the missiles out from his hand, which was just why. And launching finger gimmicks. He had launching fingers. When did I miss that in the show? And then you got the creepy mouth gimmick. You got a head turning gimmick that breaks easily because of the small gears involved. You've got overall inaccuracy is better than the Voyager, admittedly, or the Mega, admittedly. Still not the best looking figure, and just ugh. This toy was infamous because it was discounted so heavy. I personally remember seeing this toy on Amazon.com at $10 and free shipping, which they weren't making a dime off that, but it was taking up so much warehouse space, they didn't care. Just get rid of it. And this is before Amazon had a policy about just destroying old merchandise instead of, selling it at a discount or, donating it. That aside, we're talking about the toy. The toy was an abomination. It was the worst excuse for a Transformer of the time. And to this day, it is infamous for just how substandard it is, for how much it was hyped and how much it cost back in the day. Keep in mind, we're talking about inflation here. Redoing Air Attack Optimus Primal from back then, the toy is now over $125 in order to produce. Imagine today spending $125 and getting something like Supreme Chitor. Yeah. It's still that bad. If you had this in your betting pool, there's absolutely no surprise here. My number one worst Transformer toy of all time is still Titanium Megatron, the very first Titanium Megatron. A nonsensical tank mode that wouldn't actually function in the real world, blocky and uninteresting in design in every aspect, a robot mode that is flat, uninteresting, poorly painted from head to toe, and then the engineering. God, the engineering. This was designed by the Micromaster team, not Hasbro, certainly not Takara, so they had no idea what they were doing. They had diecast put into horrible places that kept the toy from functioning, kept its arms from even being able to hold themselves up in either mode. The joints were incredibly flimsy, with some pieces of the toy held on by tiny C-clips instead of actual engineering and hinges. And these were parts with heavy amounts of diecast, so they just fell off all the time. You had legs with extremely stunted and stiff articulation, and arms with super floppy articulation. You had paint that was just slathered on in this really ugly black wash that just didn't look like they tried at all. Everything about this toy is bad. There is no redeeming quality to Titanium Megatron. And that's one reason why it always tops my list. Through everything I've even just talked about, I can still point to why they are not the worst. Supreme Chitor's Beast Mode is an impressive sight. You know, Revenge of the Fallen Demolisher keeps his arm scoop gimmick in the vehicle mode without sacrificing anything else from the robot mode. Good. Armada Sideswipe. It's at least a competent looking car, even if I find it boring. And I could go down the list, and I could find those positives. Titanium Megatron has none. There is no redeeming quality. There is no play value. There is no function. There is no fun. There is nothing. Absolutely nothing to that toy that is worth your time, effort, or money. It is far and away the worst, most unpleasant experience I have ever had with a Transformer toy, and I fail to see how anything is ever going to get worse than that. Also, $15 back in the day, released as a collector's piece because it was using diecast, and you now also have the hype machine going behind this as, what were you thinking? Let's tie it up. They call it G.I. Joe Megatron, but this isn't what G.I. Joe Megatron ever looked like in any comics and anything. They just made up the design. So it's not even based on a Megatron. It's just an anomaly. An anomaly best left in the past and to never be revisited again. That, my friends, is what a top 10 worst Transformer toy list looks like. I'm sure I forgot some, and of course, this is all just my opinions, so it could be whatever, you know? Your list is going to look completely different from mine. But for my money, these are 10 examples of what the worst Transformers toys should be, not G1 Ironhide, not Pretenders, not even Wheelie. No. This is what it looks like to have the worst Transformer toys of all time. So take it, go off into the wild, and tell these random lists on these random websites they have no idea what they're talking about, because I am the plastic addict guy. I made this my business. If anyone would know, it would be me. And even I will admit, I probably forgot a few. So let me know in the comments, which ones did I forget? What's the worst for you? I'm actually kind of curious about this one. And hopefully, I will never have to talk about these toys again until I make whole videos devoted to them. Guys, I am facing the most powerful enemy any YouTuber can face, the algorithm, and I need your help to defeat him. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Every time you do, we attack that algorithm and we drive it back until it can no longer defeat this channel. Thank you very much.